Please welcome the incredible Eleanor Beaton.
Renee, it's amazing to be here.
Thank you, Coach. So to the listeners, it's a funny story is my husband is a pretty notable business coach. And actually, what's funny, Eleanor, is that your name came up in the mastermind that I had the past couple of days. Is people are like, why do you have a business coach if you're married to one of the world's top business coaches? And we're going to talk about this. There is something different about feminine and masculine energy, but also the advantage is that Eleanor's worked with Dan through his program. So I know she's getting the good stuff anyway.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I'm going to pass it all on anyway.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, she's being trained by him, but I don't actually want to work with Dan. But you have been what I love about you, just to put you up on this pedestal, is that you know what you're doing. And you do it with conviction, and also you hold people accountable. But the most important thing is that you hear me, you see me going through all these things. So I really appreciated about that when working with you. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So then with that, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you do it for.
Yeah. So my focus is working with women entrepreneurs. My company's called Safi Media, and we're on a mission to double the number of women-owned businesses that scale past $1 million in annual revenue by 2030. So it's a super ambitious mission. So to do that, part of what we do is work directly with extraordinary committed founders like you through our coaching programs. But we also work on the other side with what we call the ecosystem. So we work with incubators and accelerators. We work with banks and corporate entities who are focused on advancing women entrepreneurs, to really kind of use things like storytelling, like business coaching and entrepreneurship education, all of which is done with a gender lens, because we know that gender is a super powerful lens that shapes the experience of women and entrepreneurs and our pathway and how we do things. So that's really what the company is all about. And, it started, so I'm an immigrant to Canada. And I can remember my mom is from the Fiji Islands. So she was the main breadwinner when my parents met. And then when they decided to move to Canada, I was like 4 years old. She, like, her kind of certifications and stuff weren't recognized. So it was a totally different culture. So my parents made the decision that my mom was going to stay home and raise the kids. And a decision that so many women make, that happens inside so many families. But what happened is that my parents had a wonderful relationship, but when they disagreed about money, my dad, as the earner, always had the final say. So I can remember my mom is driving me to basketball practice. She is really mad about something, and I'm not sure what has just happened, but she's like, Eleanor, money is power. Make sure that you always have access to your own. And so this idea of the financial agency for women has been like the through line of all of the work that I've ever done. It is like the fire in my belly. And that's like the emotional heart of my coaching business and everything that I do.
Yeah. I was going to ask you why was that your mission? But now I get it. You have Was that something that inspired you from the moment you heard it? Were you always an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I initially I was a journalist. So I started my career in advertising and journalism. But it was interesting. Another conversation with my mom where she was like, which I've since learned, so a couple months ago, Claudia Golden, who is this Harvard educated economist. Sorry, wasn't educated at Harvard. She was Harvard's first tenured woman economist. She just won the Nobel Prize for her work closing the gender wage gap. So she's done like these longitudinal studies of the gender wage gap. And we like to think that the gender wage gap is all about women not earning their worth, or like evil managers who are on a quest to underpay women and all of this kind of thing. And sure, some of that is true, that exists. But the main thing that drives the gender wage gap is couples just like my parents and like people all over the world today, where you have heterosexual couples with kids, and between them as the unit of a family, they have to make a decision about high earning jobs or whether you're an entrepreneur or not, there's periods of time where even as an entrepreneur, you have a greedy job. So your business is going to take a lot from you. And there are also flexible jobs where they generally don't pay as much, but you have more flexibility to be with the kids. So that was where, that reality, my mom talked to me about it when I was young, and it was really interesting. Like when I was in college, she was like, hey, I want you to think about something. And I want you to really think about what you want to do with your career so that you can have unlimited earning potential, but you also have the opportunity. Like if you want to be with your kids and have flexibility, you can do that. So it's really ironic. My mom was having very practical conversations with me about the realities of being a woman and making money and the choices that we look at and how we can start to think about that to set ourselves up for the kinds of life that we want. So I started my first business in my early 20s. I had a communications consultancy. I did crisis communications. I made communications strategy. It was like this boutique company. And I loved it. And then I was I was working with clients, and they started asking me, like, could you do like an internal communications training program for us? I'm like, ew, no. Like but they asked. And so I tried it and I loved it. And then it was through that, like we were literally training hundreds of people through the companies that we worked with. And then around when I was doing like leadership communications, it was around those tables where some clients were like, do you do one-on-one coaching? And I was like, ooh, no. I was like, ooh, no, hello. But I just kept, I kind of responded. I was curious and I tried things. And that's what ultimately had me move into the world of coaching. And that was really sort of in late 2014, 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was what, like 8-9 years ago?
Yeah.
10 years
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did a small stint in coaching.
Yes.
For like 3 years.
Yeah.
It was an evolution of a company that I once had called Family Academy, where I was teaching entrepreneur couples how to live a more integrated life.
Oh my God, I love that. Like, hello, that's exactly what we were just talking about.
I know. So it's funny. So when we say just talking about is I have a really special guest that's coming on the podcast. I thought it was great because people kept asking Dan and I about like, how do we have our like businesses and a great marriage? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't figured this. Have we figured this out? I don't know. Turns out we had. And it's not to say that it's going to work for everybody. So anyways, started Family Academy. But what it really ended up turning into was that the women wanted to learn how to start their businesses, how to build the confidence to do the thing, how to validate their idea, all these things. And I was like, oh, like the couple thing is they didn't want that information from me. They did seek like professional therapists. I'm not certified in this.
Yeah.
So then it led into business coaching, but I didn't know where it was going.
Yeah.
And I think I did okay, but I wasn't passionate about it.
Yeah.
And there was also like imposter syndrome was a huge thing that was slowing me down. Like I remember coaching a woman whose annual revenue was $10 million.
Yeah.
Like I've never achieved that. So who am I to give this person business advice? That's ultimate imposter syndrome.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
She had already interviewed a bunch of people.
Yes.
To be her coach. And she's like, I want you. I'm like, why me? We cannot go through detailed financials because I won't be able to help you. Yeah. That's not what she wanted me for. However, it still I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through everything. Anyway, all that to say is when I found my passion back in PR and the things that we're working on this year, pretty cool. Totally different approach to PR. Yes. I'm so excited to share. That's like, you find the passion, you will find the way.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at now.
Oh, so exciting.
Oh, yeah. So exciting. But then, so you're in coaching and I mean, there's a lot of coaches out there. So
there are.
You do a fantastic job of showing up online and on Instagram, sharing your knowledge and even because I've been through the whole process of signing up as a client, customer coming through funnels. What has been your main driver of growth, especially in the last like 3 years? put those bums in the seats?
Yeah. That's such a great question. I mean, so a couple of things. One, I always think about what are the drivers what needs to happen? So when I do this thing, I always make money. And basically, whenever groups of people hear me say something, that's the driver. Having people hear me speak or teach or share insight is the number one thing that drives the business. And I can talk very tactically if you want. We can totally talk tactically about that. But that actually involves a couple of different things. So one is, I think that, my brand is really driven by sort of two core things. So one is insight. And that insight, it always is going to be sort of laced and interwoven with a total lack of sugarcoating, very, very clear, and hearing sort of fairly direct, being quite direct, not sugarcoating, being clear and delivering insight. So I think that, so I've really worked on my ability to see patterns, communicate truth, and do that in a way that's insightful, entertaining. And sometimes, I'm going to have an hour. Sometimes I'm going to have 30 seconds. So how do you really master that art of being a fantastic spokesperson for your company? I think that's like thing number one. Yeah. And then thing number two is, yes, there are a lot of coaches, but I would argue, it comes back to this initial thing that I see coaching women entrepreneurs as a specific discipline into and of itself. And so does that mean that a woman can only work with a woman business coach? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? I've worked with all kinds of fantastic coaches. But what it means is that coaching women entrepreneurs is a specific discipline. And you really start to see it as you start to get into bigger and bigger rooms, or you start to work with entrepreneurs who are, or you even start to, work with on the ecosystem side, like groups that support entrepreneurs. The big challenge they always have is how few women entrepreneurs are scaling past 1 million. Mm-hmm. And it's, and so it's like, why is that? Well, one of the reasons why there's lots of nuanced reasons to that. And so it's not just a matter of giving the same advice or looking at the same, there's certain nuances where when you step into a container where there's expertise, that there is the acknowledgement that this is a specific discipline. It's not simply a marketing ploy, that you can really start to make a difference. You can, people can feel heard and they build businesses that are meaningful to them and that meet their definition of success. Ooh, I got fired up there, Renee. I really did.
Is there any part? So I'm thinking about like sales when I think of like, especially women entrepreneurs. So I have a client right now. She's amazing. And she coaches women through sales. That's a big part where a lot of people push back, right? They're like, there's a resistance to accepting the value of what they're worth. Yeah. Was there ever a point in your journey in being a successful coach that you had to take that leap from stopping to ask for the dollar to finally being like, hey, what's your credit card number?
Where is it? Well, I would say, So, so there's a couple of things to that. And I like kind of separate asking for the money and charging prices. So like there's figuring out like what your prices are at, and are they moving the needle in your business? Because pricing is like one of the first things. It's a stroke of pen change that you can make that starts to just immediately add profit. So there's like really looking at pricing, and traditionally women have, what we will see a lot of the times is that traditionally you'll see women underpricing potentially. So there's like that piece of it. There is confidently asking for a sale, and there is closing on the spot. So there's kind of three things, in terms of what you've just shared. And I would argue that I think, there's a traditional approach to sales training, which is you close on the spot. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what success looks like. Yeah. And I would argue that's absolutely a strategy, and it's not a strategy for everybody. No. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of women who just will not do that. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's alternatives. And for women, it's all about having choice, and right? Like which doesn't mean that you don't present the things, but women generally, like, as you're working with women entrepreneurs, women will often value freedom more than they value money, even though they love money too. So another way of expressing freedom is the ability to have choice, because we still live, generational trauma is a thing. And we women live with a generational legacy of not having choice. So we had other people deal with a lot. Like, we didn't have to bring home the bacon. We didn't have to do this and the other thing, but that came at a tremendous cost of choice. So when you start to work with women, if you say this is the only way, I personally have found that puts you in this position where you are yet another daddy authority figure, which is not actually what a lot of women want. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that. Yeah, you want agency.
Exactly. So you said the word freedom. So I remember sitting in this mastermind
Yes.
with some brilliant people. And we were in like breakout sessions, so hot seats. And it was my turn to explain a couple things. And one was like the biggest roadblock in your business. And one of the questions that one of these women, she's a masculine woman, turned around, and like not masculine in the sense of physical masculinity.
Yeah.
It's just more like she was like all business the whole time.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's gotta be exhausting being like that.
Yeah.
But anyways, she goes, Renee, what do you really want in your business? And like being in this room where these people don't really know of me, but they know of my husband, and my husband's 2 seats over. They're like, it's not about the money, because obviously you guys are doing well. And I'm like, no, I want freedom. It's really about freedom. It's just the word that came to me was freedom.
Yes.
And they're like, well, then why do you have a business? And I was like, I was actually shocked that a woman asked me that why do I have a business if I want freedom?
Yeah.
Because freedom to them isn't about making money. It's about just having liberties in my day. And I go, no, that's why I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Is to have my money that I earned, that I feel safe, and my own freedom.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, I agree. And for me, there's this other part. And I think what we share is like, we're both very creative people, you know, and creation. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like myself if I don't have a way to create something and express myself, you know? And I think that there's a part of freedom when I think about freedom, which is that freedom to continuously evolve and change and grow. And a business, what I love about being an entrepreneur and what I love about having entrepreneurship as a career is what you have is this freedom to continuously reinvent yourself, to continuously keep honing in on your core gifts and make them more and more valuable. And there's just continuous growth and evolution, which to me is like real freedom, which sometimes can feel like the opposite of scaling advice, which is do the same thing over, you know what I mean? But you create the business that allows that, but you get to keep evolving, which is freedom to me.
Yeah, it's such a powerful word. It's not like one or the other. It's both.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some people get it wrong too.
Yeah.
But yes, we're both very creative people.
Yeah.
So I love this. And I feel like we talked about this already, but I do want to ask you this particular question. How does the patriarchal condition impact women's revenue?
Yeah. Oh, I love this so much. So just to kind of quickly define, patriarchy is not anti-men. It's not like there's not 1 ounce of that. I'm not like anti 50-year-old white guy. I'm like married to one. You know what I mean? So I just really want to be very clear. And to me, it's very important that we keep things in balance. But patriarchy is just simply, it's essentially how our society has been set up for a long time. And simply through millennia in our society, women have simply been worth a little bit less. You know what I mean? That's just pretty much how it goes. So like we are not necessarily like, so in general, the leaders and how, you know, it's been a lot of guys. So that's just kind of been the way it is. It's changing a lot, but so what that can mean is that in a patriarchal conditioning, a woman's role is to support, is to be a supporter. And so that, and again, there's nothing wrong with being a supporter. At people, we need to support each other. But when it comes to growing a business, so we talked about like selling and pricing and asking for what you want. It means that you need to put the needs of yourself and your business. You need to really kind of center those to make sure that when you're setting a price, your pricing, for instance, allows for profit. And that's like one way. So sometimes what I will see is people will put, I don't know if someone can afford that. I don't know if this or that. And so what happens is you make enough to cover your expenses. You make enough to pay yourself a salary, but the purpose of a business is to generate return. And so that return we experience through profit, and that profit isn't there. And so the woman's business becomes increasingly built on labor rather than on profit and the ability to use assets to create more growth. So that can come when you're not used to centering yourself, as one example. Another example, and I know we're going to talk about like the emotional realities of coaching, but in general, so if you look at sort of patriarchy, this is really interesting. So if you look at sort of classical antiquity, like Rome and Greece and all of that kind of thing, there's this lineage of women who really spoke up. So let's think of like classic women who spoke up. There's like Medusa, who did nothing other than be super powerful, and she gets her head lopped off. You know what I mean? My first thing is like, there's all these sort of things of women, like when women are powerful and have a voice.
Well, there's this thing called the witch wound.
Yes.
Right? There's a whole book called Healing the Witch Wound, which actually, this is a new concept to me too. But in understanding that historically, especially in our times, in the last 500 years, that women that spoke up were considered witches. Right. And so they would literally behead them, burn them at the stake, or send them out to the woods to just live on their own.
Yes. So it's real. You know what I mean? And this has gone on so it's easy. On the one hand, it's really easy to say, but we weren't raised, and that is totally true. But there are these cultural kind of legacies that have little tiny impacts. So when, in things like visibility and like trusting your voice and believing that what you have to say is worthwhile. But I think many women have experienced when you really come out bold and confident in yourself. And I think all of us have experienced that tremor of, I hope I don't get taken out. Like, I don't want to necessarily have an X on my back, or, that experience of sometimes women in particular are most supported. They're supported until we exceed people's expectations of us, and that loneliness, So these are just different things that a lot of times, and I know that there'll be people who are listening who are like, preach, and some people are listening and they haven't heard this before, and it's explaining a lot to them about why sometimes they feel a little nervous about really pitching themselves as true experts on a podcast, or owning the fact that they have the right to be an authority on such and such, and it's safe to do that. And for women, we need to feel safe to grow. We don't take a lot of unmitigated risks. We're extremely calculated about how we take risks. And we very often, if you want to see a woman thrive, when she feels safe,
yep,
you're going to start to see things really change. So I think these are all things that I love. Like, they're little nuances that I think are they're endlessly fascinating to me about working with women entrepreneurs and having and seeing it as it's a distinct discipline.
One of the best compliments I ever received was from a stranger whom I met. She said, "You make me feel safe." Like, to be in a room where you can give that space and that attention to make someone feel safe. Yeah. Sometimes it's not about the glory of the words you can say on a stage, or the stuff you can teach them, or the person you can introduce them to. It's really about, when you leave a room, have you made those people feel better about themselves? I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And I felt that this past week, surrounded by some brilliant minds, is what value can I bring these people? Part of this mastermind was in providing advice to these people who've achieved levels of business I can only dream of.
Yeah.
But even going into it, maybe my mission and my goal wasn't in that business value that I'd give them. but in something else.
Yeah.
And we all have that spirit in us. We all have something in us that's a unique gift. And that was the thing that was stopping me thinking, I can't give them business advice.
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't in, but maybe I could. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But to make people feel better about themselves when you leave that room is such a great goal.
Yeah. Well, it's also it creates a major qualitative shift, like a qualitative and emotional internal shift that allows someone to maybe see the value in maybe very straight up business advice that they got that they wouldn't have been open to if they hadn't been able to make that internal kind of shift first. So yeah, it's interesting how we look at, how we start to value skills. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's really powerful.
It's super powerful.
Yeah.
Right. And like talking about this word freedom, which I love. It's like one of my favorite words. How do especially in your life and in the women that you coach, how do structures in life and business create freedom?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're the only freedom that you can really depend on. So I have been huge on structure for a long time because otherwise, and I think a lot of, women in particular can relate to this, we're used to doing a lot. And we often have a lot of responsibilities on our plate. And so, we will tend to rely on sort of our labor and our schedules to produce results, so that we're always the rope. You know what I mean? They can get frayed on both ends. It's really hard to do that. When we start looking at structure and assets, it's so much more powerful. So for me, a couple of core things, I can remember when I was a consultant and my boys were really little at this time. So I have two boys, 13 and 17, and they were 1 and 4. And so every time I look back at pictures of myself from that, there's I have the hugest bags. I look younger and more vibrant now than I did then, which is kind of funny because I was so tired, but I was working so hard. So I had a consulting business, like I told you, every single, people came to me for my brain. Every single consulting contract was different. It was highly complex. So, they'd come, I'd have to scope out the business. I'd have to put together a detailed quote. We'd have to have some back and forth on that. Often the work was really complex. It was there were elements that were the same, but a lot of it was really not standardized. So I was just working my tail off. I was selling my labor and I was making great money, but I didn't have a life and I felt just psychically exhausted, really, because I didn't actually have structure. So what I had to start doing was really figuring out where I had to stop thinking like a laborer and I had to start thinking like an engineer. And I had to start embracing product-led growth. How do I start to create an offer? What's the repeatable thing in here? And how can I get myself emotionally to a thing where I'm not always trying to solve everybody's problem, but I'm starting to productize my knowledge? So that's that became a structure. And so first it was the actual thing that I sold. And then it was okay, how can I develop structure so I'm selling it in the same way every time? Okay, got it. That's working. Now, how can I figure out some repeatable marketing structures that then can be handed off to other people? So it's really this process of systematizing, of finding the gold, systematizing it out, and then scaling it up. And that's structure that's structure. So now if I don't feel good, I can still make money. Yeah. If I don't, if I am just having an off week or an off month or whatever, it's not reliant on me in the same way. And that gives freedom.
As Dan says, you can't build $1 million businesses off $10 tasks.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. That Dan, he's no dummy.
No,
he's a pretty smart guy.
I should take some business advice from him.
Right?
Yeah. So when someone looks at the idea of structure though, there's so many things you can do, right? In terms of automations, delegation, where does somebody start the process in understanding where I need to create a structure in my life and business?
Yeah. So I always think first in the thing that makes you money. I really look at, so the way that I look at it is I always sort of have a bit of a hierarchy with it. So the first thing is, because essentially what you're looking for are where are the constraints, and so you use structure. So if I think about a business, we're always looking for sort of the magic bullet or the magic thing, but really, whether it's a factory or it's anything else, the thing that generates revenue is throughput. So how easily, if you think about your customers as like these extraordinary goldfish, I know it sounds like, but I think about like these beloved, gorgeous goldfish and incredibly resilient, but they're swimming upstream because that's what it can often feel like when they're engaging in your service. You know what I mean? They have a problem. It's challenging. If it weren't challenging, they wouldn't be spending money to fix it. So there's a little bit of an upstream thing. So as you allow, how quickly and smoothly and joyously and spaciously can you allow these goldfish to flow through the world of your business and come out the other side, either buying more or referring their friends, So it's about throughput. So the best way to look at throughput is to identify where are the core constraints right now. Now, you can definitely, usually it's going to be your time. And there's a great book called Buy Back Your Time that people can read that really looks at that. Yeah. But very often, like the women-owned businesses are much more likely to be in the service space, and they're much more likely to be built around the woman delivering the service. So one way is to start looking at the service itself. How can you bring structure and repeatability? How can you start to find, so that's really sort of thing number one. And then based on that, you can do it or you just increase your efficiency at doing it. But now it's sort of productized. So now you could allow more goldfish. You know what I mean? Because it's not different every time. So that's generally the place. Like we do, our foundational program is called the 500K offer. And it's like, how can you create an offer that you spend no more time generating 50K for, like you are spending the same amount of time, whether you're generating 50K or 500K. How can you create that? And that is a really important piece of infrastructure because until you have that, you can market all you want. But that just amplifies the rate at which people can't do business with you anyway. And I've been in those shoes, by the way. I had a breakdown in my first business. I'll have to tell you, I almost got sued by a very famous person because I was a top ghostwriter in this country and I missed my deadline. I wanted to be out of that business for so long before I did. And so I didn't have a productized, everything was so super bespoke and I had a breakdown. I just couldn't keep doing it. So I didn't do what I'm saying to do. I didn't do it soon enough. And it created all kinds of problems in my business.
Oh no, I get that. Right. And here's the thing is not everything can be automated and systematized and created procedures and processes. There was actually a woman I was chatting with the other day who I don't even know what her revenues are like, $6 to $10 million a year.
Yeah.
And she was just saying how much she's lost the spark in creating stuff for social because everything was a process.
Yes.
She's like, I just want to just pick up my phone and just do a thing. But I have this creative block because now I have to follow a process. It gets to a point where sometimes it's too much.
Yeah.
But there's the other end of the spectrum where there's nothing set up.
Yes.
And even the simple things, for me, the process of becoming a guest on my podcast is very simple. You get invited or you pitch and we say yes, but mostly you get invited. Mm-hmm. And then the team sends out an email that's a template.
Yeah.
We don't write it. It's a template in Gmail with 2 links. You fill out the form, you schedule a call. The form is the same.
Yeah.
And all they get pulled into the notes. So 10 minutes before the call is I'll go through the intake form. Based on the person that I know, I come up with a question. So this process would take hours. Now it's 10 minutes.
Yes.
And then once it's done recording, everything's stored in Riverside.
Yep.
And I record the intro, the ad. There's an ad unique for every show. And in the show itself, I just send a Vox to my assistant saying, hey, my episode with Eleanor is available in Riverside now.
Yeah.
That is it. And then it goes live magically on the day it's scheduled to go live. That's it. I show up for the call.
Which, right. And that's like, that's structure so that you can show up and be you. And like behind the scenes, I don't think people, like, I remember when we were working together, like looking at some of your, like what you do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's just this brain for like next level, thorough organization that is very, you know what I mean? Like it's, when you really understand flow and organization, you can create, like I can completely see how your brain works that way. It's very, very cool. It's very cool. And a natural, but what I love about what you do is it's a natural skill and capacity, but you've done that extra step to template it, to teach your team how to do it, to make sure you get help doing it. So it's like you're able to exploit or leverage or amplify a natural skill that you have, which it's like that, it's that next 20%, you know, that so often entrepreneurs don't do because they're so overwhelmed. And I just wanted to, you know, because I think that's very cool.
I cannot work if it's not organized information. And if my job is to organize the information, that's fine.
Yes.
But also know that's an added step.
Yeah.
And I've worked with influencers. I've worked with people that have 60 million followers and social accounts. And I am to this day still dumbfounded at how unorganized these big agencies, small agencies, influencers are, that if they even set up little systems, little procedures in the back end, one little bit at a time, the not only the freedom that they get, but it would minimize human error.
Yes.
It would allow them to be more creative, inspired, motivated, because the stuff's just running in the back end.
Yes.
Paying bills, all the things.
Right? All the things.
All the things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about business models. We got a couple minutes left here.
Yeah.
You have what you call the dual business model.
Yes.
And you say, which I agree, is the most brilliant scalable offer for women entrepreneurs. Why is that?
Well, okay. So like most of my good ideas, it came to me out of just indignation and frustration. So I don't know. We didn't talk about this. So like 6 years ago, I was seriously looking at going into SaaS. And so I was at an ecosystem, like startup ecosystem conference. And I had a very successful coaching business at this time already. And I was like talking to some of the startup founders there. And we were talking about our businesses. They have done zero. Okay. They have not, a lot of them couldn't find a customer to save their life. I could sell them under the table all day long. And, but when I told them of what I did, their kind of eyes glazed over and they're like, oh, so that's like a lifestyle business. I'm like, and I was like, the way that they were saying it, it's like in the South when people say, bless your heart. And it sounds nice, but it's not. Like they are not, that is shade. So I was getting shade and I am getting, like, I'm sensitive and I was getting so mad because I was like, you're saying it's a lifestyle business. That is not a compliment. And like, wow, just wow. Okay. So don't get mad, get even. But I left that event thinking about all the extraordinary women entrepreneurs that I know who, and when you're not taken seriously, it has consequences. It has all kinds of consequences. If you're seen as this lifestyle business, you know what? That impacts your ability to get funding. It impacts your ability to get into certain rooms. It impacts all kinds of things. I don't need to tell you about authority. Yeah. So I was like, there is like our businesses, we're looking at them differently. No, it's not a startup where your goal is to scale to unicorn status and exit. It looks different. And if we keep having it be like a lifestyle business, that's not like these guys are here and their goal is to become a unicorn, which is $1 billion valuation. I would say that one in 100 of them, 1 in 1,000 of them are going to have the opportunity, but they are confidently talking about their vision and their plans because they have a clear promised land and a clear destination. Yep. And we don't have that. So I'm an ex-journalist. So the way that I do shit always is like to go and interview people to find out. So I did like months of landmark interviews with women, like women entrepreneurs. What do you want? How do you measure success? What's important to you? And it was money influence, the ability that your ideas are going to be heard and acted upon, that you have the ability to evoke change or transformation, so impact, and autonomy, freedom. And so I was like, okay, what does a business model? So when we hear things like 10x, and I love 10x is easier than 2x, and trust me, but what I was finding is that it was putting these undue pressure on it. It was hard for it. There had to be a different way of looking at it. And so we really started taking a look at businesses going through their financials and everything else. And that's where we developed the Jewel business model, which is 30% top line growth. And PS, if you're consistently growing 30% a year, you're going to have a dynamite business. So 30% top line growth until the founder decides to accelerate or decelerate. So that's the first 30. Second 30 is 30% profit. So that you can invest in what you want to, you can fuel the growth of your business and build a financial fortress, and then 30% open time. So that's the Jewel business model. It is a model of growth that puts the woman's well-being at the center and creates a business. It's a way to channel ambition. It's a way to support growth. And so there's core things, like there's infrastructure pieces, there's mindset pieces and leadership pieces, and there's sort of support pieces. But that's the Jewel business model, born out of indignation.
Yeah.
And has been really sort of a powerful, like all of our programming is built around that model.
I love it. And I did your sales training program.
Yes.
And then we did some one-on-one stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think I touched the Jewel thing.
No. So So the Jewel Business Foundation, that's where we look at the first piece of infrastructure, which is like a scalable model, a scalable offer. So that's the sort of business model itself, or core piece of the business model, because you got to get out of delivery, and then to the degree that you can. And then from there, we start to look at scalable lead gen, scalable sales, a scalable sales system. And we look at things like, how you start to really maximize your business model and how you start to kind of set up scale and freedom in the business through team and cash reserves, et cetera.
I love it. And you're good at it.
Thank you.
Such an expert. It was so much fun working with you.
Oh my gosh. Same.
So much fun. I was like, fun. Eleanor, don't sugarcoat anything. Hold me accountable. Whatever you got to do at this point.
No problem.
Some big wins through it all.
Yeah.
But with respect to time, I do have one last question for you.
Yeah.
When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Oh my gosh. To me, being a wild woman is to be a total beast. You know what I mean? And to embrace, like, to be a total beast in the gym, on the soccer field, in the basketball court, like to embrace like what makes me awesome and intense. And also to really embrace kind of what we talked about earlier, that there is also this need for me to be soft, to be cared for, to be nourished, and that those two things, they coexist and they make that's me at my wild, in my wild. It's like full, I guess I'm talking my way through this definition, but it's like full embodiment and expression of not only who I am, but who I am evolving to become.
I love it.
Yeah.
So if people want to go online to find you, where can they go?
So they can go to safimedia.co, or you can find me on Instagram at Eleanor Beaton.
Love it. Well, Eleanor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, so fun as always.